So, with the first update, and this is concerning my beautiful nation of South Africa. And we have seen, of course, like I explained, with the delay in the show, having not produced an episode for a week, I have to talk about the fact that Jacob Zuma's arrest will be coming soon. Now, if you have seen the court's decision about having to pay back the legal fees, especially that it was the state's money, that the way it's been justified. If you recall in that particular prophecy that I received an update concerning when Cyril Ramaphosa was cracking down on corruption. And we've seen what happened, particularly in July and, of course, in August, I should say, more so. And when this commission had to come and get into the whole factors about the policing and the police department being quite corrupt, and of course high scale and of course high profile cases just being thrown away by the wayside, or no investigations having progressed past a certain point. We now going to get to the point where Mr. Zuma, who is the former president, will be arrested. And I explained in that update themselves that how we're going to see this is that firstly, they're going to start raiding, and you're going to see the SIU, which is the State Investigative Unit, start raiding his actual home fest or his homestead of Nkandla, which is out in KwaZulu-Natal. And that's how it's going to become about. Now, we've already seen this preemptive move by, of course, Cyril Ramaphosa ultimately, but the courts having to say that, listen, Mr. Ex-President, you owe us a certain amount of money for your whole legal defense and your legal defense team. How about paying it back? And what he said was ultimately he doesn't have it. So, of course, now that we've seen the dots starting to connect, this is where it's going to go down, that the SIU, or the State Investigative Unit, are going to start justifying why they need to raid that particular homestead of Nkandla. And of course, that will also entail attaching assets and everything they can find. Now, I saw them going in the whole dream as to how they were able to just get him arrested. Was they had full access to his compound and everything else. I don't know if there any vaults that they were looking at, and it was like, let's just put it this way, from what I had gathered, and I do admit I'm a little bit vivid on what actually transpired now, but I did write it down then, and I have not opened that up. But it looks like you were stashing some things somewhere. So, with him saying that he doesn't necessarily have it, I don't know if that's the case. Let's just put it that way. I'm not speaking under any sort of great certainty on that, but the only certainty I know is that how it's going to all go down is that the SIU, like I explained, is going to start digging, and then he's going to be put into a, police van, like I saw the last time, and as the justification for all of this. Now, the problem now comes in, whereas we saw what happened in 2021, the last time he was actually escorted to the jail cells by the police, and the havoc and, of course, the anarchy that was just like, I don't know how else you're going to call that, because it's straight up anarchy, where we saw the looting by people following that event. And this time, what I do believe that they're going to do, and of course, this is through the MK party, which is the Mkonto Wesizwe party, and they're going to start justifying it by saying that the GNU, as in the Government of National Unity, is completely illegitimate. And therefore, they're going to get their members, or not necessarily their members, but even their support base, to pretty much rally behind Jacob Zuma and that release, the way I see it. Not that I got that from the spirit, but the only thing I got from the spirit was just straight up, mad protest happening. And this was concerning the election of 2024, where the ANC, along with the DA, went into bed with each other, right? And in that particular dream, the whole actual government that was supposed to have won the election, or the actual real winners, was the Moonshot Pact that was led by John Steenhuisen of the Democratic Alliance, along with the smaller parties that were in that Moonshot Pact. I'm sure people remember that whole particular, that was that whole multi-party charter, and then they were the ones that were actually had won the election. Even so much so that now the recently departed Neil de Beer, who was also the politician in there, and he was in the know of that, and he was in the preliminary discussions concerning that he pretty much, with his during his last days here on earth, and he was stating that he was aware that certain things went another way after they had their own Moonshot Pact. The DA were the ones that set certain terms of when they all negotiated, nobody was to go into bed with the ANC. But what was the first thing they did? The Democratic Alliance went into bed with the ANC. However, why I was shown the dream that I was only shown John Steenhuisen was because it was the Helen Zille side of the coin, or the part of the power struggle within the Democratic Alliance, that went into bed with the African National Congress. And then therefore, what that ultimately led to is the election itself being rigged. So with the election being rigged, as the MK party are going to now start bringing that up, because if one remembers that after the election, they went on this big campaign, and they found evidence about the fact that the election was rigged, and particularly in KwaZulu-Natal. And that's the dangerous part of it. And what then happened is that the actual, is it the IEC, there you go, the Independent Electoral Committee, they then said, no, hang on, you MK members, we're going to sue you for saying the election is rigged. And then furthermore, that because they had ministers in parliament, right, they then withheld salaries. And then we started seeing that after them initially threatening to pretty much boycott the whole parliament and everything else concerned with the government and all that stuff, when it came down to money, when I think there's also a certain part of the money, and I can't remember exactly how it works, but there's a particular disbursement that comes from the taxpayers that goes to the political parties, and it goes via the IEC. And the IEC also threatened to withhold that party funding too. And then that's when we saw that the MK party all of a sudden kept quiet. And then they sent all their ministers a week after, or maybe 2 weeks after Parliament had already resumed duty, or had already commenced duty, I should say, because it's not like they had already been in procession for long. It was just the first preliminary meeting and all that. And then thereafter, they came in late to swear in their members from the MK party. And we didn't hear anything much about the election being rigged. So this is why I had to go the long way around to explain this one, because it's quite detailed in the fact that as to the developments of all of this, is that of course they're going to now wait for, and I believe that this is going to be one of the actual cards in Jacob Zuma's hands, that he will likely to play if they ever come after him, is that he's going to come after the integrity of the elections. And then this will then, I guess, rile up the constituencies. But it's going to go deeper than just MK members, because, I mean, it is the election was truly, truly rigged, like I explained, and something that God had shown me through the Spirit. So we are going to see this play out. And of course, I just pray that, everyone pretty much stays safe, and please just be careful out there. Whenever there's a ruckus and all that, just try to kind of stay home and stay out of any trouble and anything of the sort. And I'm not going to go too far into that, because we're also seeing the whole protest about, like for instance, there was the one about the closed taps or the dry taps in Johannesburg. And I'm actually, it was actually aimed at city of Joburg, where there are like more than 100 suburbs who have actually are going without water, or their water levels are just insufficient, I should say, to really, to be deemed conducive to service delivery or even water consumption, or it's just completely inadequate as far as the water infrastructure around the country. So we are already seeing all of these things just starting to boil up. Of course, it's going to be one of those, it's going to be a plethora of issues coming all at once, and then pretty much just lead to this whole boiling point where we see South Africa is going to be reaching, and it's quite strange to say that it'll eventually break out into the whole racial lines and people, and as far as fighting each other, that sort of thing. I've already covered that, so I don't want to repeat all of that too much. I just want to stay focused on this thing of saying that, listen, guys, this is going to be a big part, that this was the high-profile arrest that pretty much will put that prophecy to bed. And like I explained, that with the component of service delivery, particular to this, and the reason why they're all doing this all of a sudden, is that the state itself is out of money. So Cyril Ramaphosa, in this instance, is going after these, all these corrupt officials and all this stuff. And with that said, the whole pala thing and whatever is going on with him on his side, because he'll be able to prove that the police are compromised. And see, this angle is something I've been speaking about for a few years, and how consistent it is. And already the spring, where it coincides with the fact that there's a lot of rain that is coming in all of a sudden. And if you notice that when the rain actually comes, the actual weather is a little bit cooler. So this is just to drive up the demand for electricity and get the load shedding in, so that Cyril Ramaphosa keeps digging. And the one thing is this, and it's something I actually had a discussion with my own mother, was the mere fact that when one considers that Cyril Ramaphosa looks very, very much in control. Notice that he's not even breaking a sweat over this pala thing. And that this is all strategic, that God himself has been helping Cyril Ramaphosa. So he knew exactly when the right time to strike was. That only God can give you that kind of peace, So say whatever you like. I'm not saying that he's a good president or not, or, or a good administrator, or anything of the sort, or, please, I'm not going that far. But essentially, this just goes to show that, as far as God's hand and how complex God can be, that he can even help somebody like whom I kind of am not a huge fan of, as far as that's concerned. But even somebody like him is not out of reach for God. So, and the important thing is that you just want to pray for somebody like that to actually come into his own repentance. So I guess this is between him and God. So, whatever I think about him, and like I just explained, it's not like I'm a fan or anything. Who cares? If God seems him as good enough for him and is not holding anything against Cyril Ramaphosa, then who am I to do so? Anyway, that's enough for this update. I'll come in with the next one.